Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a quiet woman in Sarasota who let her neighbor call the police on her husband 11 times in 2 years, smiled through every HOA meeting, and then walked into a federal courthouse with a folder no one knew existed. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My neighbor called the cops on my husband 11 times. On the 12th call, I made sure the federal government answered the phone. My name is Margaret Whitaker. I am 47 years old. I live in a stucco house on a cul-de-sac in Sarasota, Florida, and for the last 19 years, I have practiced civil rights law in a small office above a sandwich shop on Main Street. My husband Daniel is a high school band director. He is 6'2". He is black. He drives a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a bumper sticker that says, "Music saves lives." On the morning this story really starts, I was standing at my kitchen sink in a faded blue robe, watching 2 Sarasota County Sheriff's deputies walk up our driveway for the 11th time in 23 months. Daniel was in the garage, tuning a student's clarinet. I could smell the coffee burning behind me. I could hear the deputies' radios crackling like wet paper. And I felt something cold and very old settle in my chest, the same feeling I had as a young lawyer the first time I held a file thick enough to end a career. I did not cry. I did not yell. I picked up the phone on the counter and I pressed record, because somewhere in a locked cabinet in my office there was already a folder with 10 other recordings, and tonight you are going to find out what was inside it. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I want to know who is with me on this one. Our street looked like the front of a brochure, palm trees trimmed into matching green lollipops, driveways pressure washed every March, mailboxes painted the exact shade of cream the HOA design committee had voted on in 2018. From the sidewalk, you would have called it peaceful. You would have called it safe. You would have used the word community, and you would have believed it. We moved into the Bayshore Pines subdivision in the spring of 2023. I had just made partner. Daniel had just signed a new contract at the high school. We picked the house for the live oak in the backyard and the way the afternoon light fell through the kitchen window at 4 o'clock. The neighbors brought a casserole the first weekend. A woman in linen pants shook my hand on the porch and said, "We are so glad to have you." She looked right past Daniel when she said it. I noticed. I filed it away. I have been filing things away my whole career. The HOA president was a woman named Carol Mendez. She was 61, recently divorced, recently retired from a regional bank, and she ran the neighborhood like it was the last thing she had left. She wore navy blazers to pool meetings. She kept a clipboard on the passenger seat of her white Lexus. She drove the cul-de-sac twice a day at 15 miles an hour, eyes scanning lawns, garages, garbage cans, and one driveway in particular, ours. The first call came 6 weeks after we moved in. Daniel was unloading marching band equipment from the trunk of the Civic at 9 in the evening. 2 deputies arrived within 11 minutes. "Suspicious person," the dispatcher told them. "Possible burglary in progress." Daniel handed over his license. He smiled the smile he has practiced his entire life, the one that costs him something every time he uses it. The deputies apologized. They said, "You understand, ma'am. We have to respond to every call." I said I understood. I said it twice. Then I went inside and wrote down the date, the time, the badge numbers, the exact words the deputy used at the door. I did not know yet that I had just started page 1 of a folder that would, 2 years later, close an entire community pool fund and end Carol Mendez's life as she knew it. Daniel grew up in a small town outside Mobile, Alabama. His father was a Baptist minister who taught him 3 rules before he turned 10. Keep your hands where people can see them. Keep your voice lower than the loudest white person in the room, and never, ever run, even if you are late, even if it is raining, even if your own house is on fire. Daniel told me those rules on our second date in 2003. I was 24. I thought I understood. I did not understand until I watched a grown man, my husband, raise his hands at his own mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon because a woman in a navy blazer had told a 911 operator that a strange man was loitering near her property line. That was the second call. He had been checking our mail. By the end of the first year, the count was 7. Suspicious person, 4 times. Possible trespasser, twice. A welfare check on a child Carol said she had seen in our backyard, which was Daniel's nephew, who was 9, who was visiting from Atlanta, who had been swinging on the rope swing under the live oak for exactly 6 minutes. Each time, the deputies came. Each time, they left apologizing. Each time, I wrote it down. And each time, Daniel walked back into our kitchen, set his keys on the counter very gently, and asked me the same quiet question. Are we doing the right thing, staying? I did not answer him for a long time. Because the truth was, I was already doing something. I just was not ready to tell him what. The triggering incident came in the spring of 2024. Carol stood up at the April HOA meeting in a folding chair in the clubhouse, smoothed her navy blazer, and proposed a new initiative she called the Neighborhood Awareness Program. She smiled when she said it. She used the words safety and standards and family atmosphere. She suggested a private security patrol funded by an additional quarterly assessment. She suggested guest registration at the front gate. She suggested, and this is the part I will never forget, a photo directory of every adult resident, so that, in her words, we all know who actually belongs here. A man 2 rows behind me cleared his throat. A woman next to me looked at her shoes. Nobody said the thing everyone in that room was thinking. Carol's eyes found mine across the clubhouse. She smiled wider. She said, "Margaret, you are a lawyer. Surely you understand the importance of documentation." And I smiled back, the way she had smiled at me, and I said, "Carol, I understand documentation better than almost anyone in this room." She did not know what I meant. She thought I was agreeing. I went home that night, opened the locked drawer in my home office, and added the meeting minutes to the folder. The folder was already 2 inches thick. By the following spring, it would be 4. 3 weeks later, the 8th call came at 2 a.m. Daniel was asleep next to me. The deputies pounded on our front door so hard, the framed wedding photo in the hallway slid sideways on its nail. Carol had reported a domestic disturbance. "Screaming," she said. "A man's voice," she said. "Possibly a weapon," she said. There was no screaming. There was no weapon. There was my husband in pajama pants, hands raised at chest level, while a deputy with a flashlight asked him if he lived here and if he could prove it. I stood behind Daniel in my bathrobe. I gave the deputy my bar card. I asked for the incident number. I asked for the name of the reporting party, which by law in Florida I could not get, but I asked anyway so it would be on the body camera audio. Then I closed the door, walked into the kitchen, and sat down on the tile floor in the dark. Daniel sat down next to me. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Maggie, I am tired." And I knew, sitting on that cold tile at 2:17 in the morning, that the time for filing things away was almost over. The time for opening the folder was almost here. The next morning, I drove to my office before sunrise. I pulled every body camera clip from every incident. I had been quietly requesting them under public records law for 19 months, one at a time, in batches small enough that nobody in the Sheriff's Records Division would ever connect the requests. I had 340 minutes of footage. I had 11 911 call recordings. I had the HOA meeting minutes, the management company emails, Carol's personal emails to the board, which a sympathetic former secretary had forwarded to me in a plain envelope 6 months earlier. I had photographs of Carol's car parked across from our driveway at odd hours. I had a spreadsheet of every call to law enforcement on our street for the last 5 years, broken down by address and by reporting party. 73% of the calls about our block had come from one house, Carol's. I had a folder. And inside that folder, I had a federal civil rights case under Section 1983 and the Fair Housing Act, against the HOA, against the management company, and against Carol Mendez personally. I had not told Daniel yet. I was waiting for him to be ready. I was waiting for me to be ready. After that night on the kitchen floor, we were both ready. If you have ever had a neighbor turn your own home into a place you cannot rest, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone in this. The rescue, if you want to call it that, came from a woman named Eleanor Briggs. Eleanor was 74. She lived 3 doors down. She had buried 2 husbands and 1 son, and she had lived in Bayshore Pines since the cul-de-sac was a dirt road in 1979. Eleanor knocked on our door the morning after the 2 a.m. visit, holding a tin of lemon bars and a manila envelope. She said, "Honey, I have been watching that woman watch your husband for 2 years, and I have been writing it down." She handed me the envelope. Inside were 46 pages of dated, timed, handwritten observations in beautiful loopy cursive. Carol Mendez parked across from 4412 at 7:14 a.m., remained 22 minutes, took photographs with her phone. Carol Mendez stopped Mr. Whitaker at the mailbox, asked to see identification. Eleanor had been my witness for 2 years, and I had not known. She squeezed my hand and said, "Child, I am old, but I am not blind, and I am not quiet anymore." I cried for the first time in the entire 2 years, right there on the porch. Eleanor patted my back like she was burping a baby. She said, "You go get them." I filed the federal complaint on a Thursday in October 2024. The press release went out at 9 the next morning. By noon, the management company's general counsel had called my office 3 times. By 2 o'clock, Carol Mendez had been served on her front porch by a process server in a blue polo shirt. I watched it from my kitchen window. She read the cover page. She sat down on her own front step. She put her face in her hands. And for the first time in 2 years, I did not write it down. I just watched. The case did not move fast. Federal cases never do. We spent 8 months in discovery. We deposed Carol for 2 days. She wore a different navy blazer each day. She cried on day 1. She got angry on day 2. Her attorney objected 91 times. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, I played her the audio of her own 911 call from the night of the domestic disturbance. Her voice on the recording was calm, almost cheerful. She had told the operator that she had heard a man screaming in a foreign language. There had been no screaming. Daniel speaks English and a little high school Spanish. He had been asleep. Carol looked at the table when the recording stopped. Her attorney requested a break. Outside of work, life kept moving the way real life does. Daniel and I took a long weekend in the Blue Ridge Mountains in November. We rented a cabin from a kind couple named Ruth and Henry, who left fresh sheets on the bed every Sunday and knocked before they brought firewood to the porch. We adopted a rescue beagle from the shelter in Bradenton. We named her Etta, after Etta James, because Daniel cried the first time we played her music in the kitchen, and the dog put her head on his foot. I planted a lemon tree in the backyard under the live oak. Daniel started teaching a free Saturday morning music class for kids at the community center downtown. We did not talk about Carol at dinner. We did not talk about the case in bed. We kept one room of our life, the kitchen at 6 in the evening, the porch at 9, the backyard on Sundays, untouched by her. That was how we survived. The return, the real return, came in June 2025. The case was set for mediation in a federal courthouse in Tampa. The night before, Daniel asked me if I was nervous. I told him the truth. I told him I had been waiting for this meeting for 2 years, and in some quieter way, for my entire career. He kissed my forehead. He said, "Maggie, go finish it." Etta the beagle slept between us. I did not sleep at all. I walked into that mediation room at 9 in the morning with a banker's box and a calm I had not felt in 23 months. Carol was already seated. She had lost weight. Her blazer hung loose at the shoulders. The HOA's attorney sat on her left. The management company's attorney sat on her right. The mediator, a retired federal judge with kind eyes, asked if I wanted to make an opening statement. I said I did. I did not yell. I did not raise my voice. I opened the folder. I told them I had 340 minutes of body camera footage. I told them I had 11 911 recordings. I told them I had 46 pages of contemporaneous witness observations from a neighbor who would testify under oath. I told them I had the HOA meeting minutes in which Carol Mendez had proposed a photo directory so that, and I quoted her here, "We all know who actually belongs here." I slid that page across the table. Carol did not look at it. I told them I had emails from Carol to 2 board members referring to my husband by a phrase I will not repeat in this story because my husband asked me not to, but which is preserved in the federal court record forever. I told them I had a pattern. I told them I had a federal statute. I told them I had a jury pool in Tampa that would not look kindly on any of this. Then I looked at Carol, and I said the sentence I had been carrying for 2 years, the sentence that answered the question Daniel had asked me on our kitchen floor at 2:17 in the morning. I said, "Carol, you wanted to know who actually belongs here. The answer is, my husband belongs here, and after today, you will not." The room was very quiet. The HOA's attorney asked for a recess. They came back 4 hours later with a number. We countered. They came back again. By 6 in the evening, we had a signed term sheet. The settlement was confidential as to amount, but the public consent decree was not. The HOA was required to disband the neighborhood awareness program. The management company was required to implement fair housing training for every property in their portfolio in the state of Florida. Carol Mendez was personally enjoined from contacting law enforcement about our household for any reason short of an active fire. And the entire community pool fund, every dollar Carol had spent 20 years protecting and policing and presiding over, was redirected by court order to a Sarasota nonprofit that provides legal aid to families facing housing discrimination. The pool closed in August. The sign on the gate is still there. If you have stayed with me through all of this, thank you. Tell me in the comments what part of the story stayed with you the most. I drove home from Tampa that night with the windows down and the radio off. Daniel was waiting on the porch with Etta on his lap and 2 glasses of cold sweet tea on the railing. I sat down next to him. I did not say anything for a long time. Then I talked, not to him, but to the younger version of me, the 24-year-old law student who had sat across from Daniel on our second date and listened to 3 rules a black father had taught his son before the age of 10. I told her that the folder she would one day learn how to build was not paranoia. I told her that the quiet she would learn to keep was not weakness. I told her that being treated like you do not belong by people who never deserved the room is not the same as not belonging. I told her to marry him anyway. I told her to plant the lemon tree. I told her that on a porch in Sarasota, 23 years later, a black man and his wife and a small brown dog would sit in the dark and listen to the cicadas and know, for the first time in 2 years, that nobody was going to knock on the door. Daniel reached over and held my hand. He said, "Maggie, we are home." And we were.